today's guest, Mr. Bill Konkolesky, and I will let you introduce him, Jer.
Okay, so Bill, I've known Bill now since 2010, so about 15 years. Bill's a really great guy. He's been in MUFON a long time, since 93. I'm sorry, since 2004. No, he's been the state director for Michigan since 2004, but he's been in MUFON since 1993. I met him back in 2010 in Youngblood, Pennsylvania at a Bigfoot UFO conference where he gave a talk. And I never told you this, Bill, but there was several speakers there, and we were going to go to the dinner where all the speakers were at, and Stanton Friedman was there, and I was hoping I'd be able to sit at the table with Stanton Friedman. So when I got seated at the table with Bill, I'm like, well, okay, fine. You know, he was kind of seems like a fun guy, but that's all right. But I'm so glad that that happened. You know, after meeting Bill, he's a super nice guy. His story is just absolutely amazing. I'm very happy that that happenstance happened that way. So, Bill, let me read your last paragraph here. It says, Bill has regularly delivered UFO presentations at libraries, conferences, and other venues since 1999. He's been on ABC TV, Peter Jennings, Seeing and Believing. He's been on the SyFy network on Abduction Diaries, and he has contributed as the consultant to the History Channel, UFO Hunters, as well as many other cable network UFO documentaries. He's a recurring guest on various paranormal radio programs, and his writing has appeared in numerous UFO books, magazines, and websites. He does have 2 books out, and I believe you're working on a third. Is that right?
Yeah, it'll be a while, but yeah.
Okay, so he's working on third, but I recommend his other 2.
The first one's Experiencer Raised in Two Worlds, and the second one is Experiencer Two Worlds Collide. And I'll get into that a little bit.
All right, and Bill, the floor is yours, my good friend, if you want to share or whatever you want to do.
All right, cool. All right, thanks so much for having me. I got to say, between you and the other local chapter that you have, you've been hosting some really tremendous guests lately, so it's really an honor to be included in the docket of people that you have speak for you. My name's Bill Konkolesky, and as Jared explained, that I am the state director for the Michigan chapter of the Mutual UFO Network. I've been a member since '93 of MUFON and state director since 2004. Some are telling me that I've now surpassed Bill Jones of Ohio to be the longest standing MUFON state director. And that's kind of cool if that's the case. But it's really just a matter of how many decades you want to spend so much of your time volunteering for the organization. So yeah, I've got a couple books, and those are the ones that are here in the green frame. I've done a bunch of television projects, much of which Jerry has already mentioned. The most recent one that I did was Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix a couple of years ago. They had in their 3rd season, the episode was called Something in the Sky, and that was about March 8th, 1994 UFO event in Michigan. And I was proud to have put that together. Every single witness in that program who actually speaks on camera is somebody that I provided for it. So it's a really good one if you haven't yet seen it. And I've also, besides the 2 books I've written, I've contributed to a half a dozen other books, and more books that I've contributed to are coming out soon. Now, about my books, I will be giving sort of an edited overview of my whole life. And this will cover really all the big high points of things that have happened to me in my life. And for further detail, again, I have 2 books. They're on Amazon and Borders, Walmart, things like that. And my first book, Experiencer Raised in Two Worlds, covers up to roughly about age 20 in my life. And it's the theme of the book is, if you want to call it a theme, is what it's like to grow up having this phenomena happen to you. And the second book, Experiencer Two Worlds Collide, is about the next 5 years of my life. So much crazy stuff happened in that 5 years that it warranted its own book. And I know when you come into a presentation about somebody's encounters, you may not know what you're going to get. In my case, this was not something that I invited into my life. I am not one that say channels. I'm not a trans medium. So I don't talk about things like the Galactic Council or Arcturians or Pleiadians. I really, to me, the mystery is still there. The jury is still out on what exactly is happening to so many people, and I'm just trying to keep my feet on the ground while this unknown phenomena continues to happen. And there is a great quote from Whitley Strieber that I think really encapsulates sort of my background with the phenomena, how I feel about it. Says the power of the encounter comes from acknowledging your helplessness and keeping the whole matter in question. Because the deeper the question goes, the more you attempt to some kind of resolution. If you keep asking these beings questions, they keep reforming the thing in such a way that the questions get more provocative, but can't quite be answered. If you start saying, well, they're aliens and they're from this planet, you're lost. I've often been in situations where the question has been impossible to live with. You can't not answer it, and you can't answer it either. And there you have it. You sit in a situation where you can't bear to be, and you grow. So there is a great sort of strength and growth that develops from this situation. But it's much like anybody who's gone through any other great traumas in their life and found themselves in a position where they've hit rock bottom, and then they grow from that. And that's kind of where I feel about the encounters that have happened to me. Okay, so next question. I'm not crazy, right? So here's a picture of me from several years ago. I participated in a study from Wayne State University, the big college that's in the city of Detroit, where they wanted to see if I um, had a strange sleep pattern issue that was causing my experiences. And so for 3 nights, I stayed at a hospital in downtown Detroit where they hooked me up to all sorts of monitors, all sorts of stuff stuck to all over my body. And there were a group of people that had claimed the abduction phenomena as myself. And there was also a control group, uh, people that agreed to stay for 3 nights in the hospital. And just to sort of be the comparison to the people that said that they were abductees. When the study was done, here are the actual charts of my 3 nights. When the study was done, the people, the doctors that were running it, said that I had basically blown their experiment because I had a better sleep pattern than anybody in the abductee category, and also I had a better sleep pattern than anybody in the control pattern in the control category too. So they couldn't claim that it was any sort of sleep issue. And I also took the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Index, or is that inventory? I don't remember what the I stands for, frankly. But it's basically a test that tries to see if somebody's fantasy prone. And the test came out that I am not fantasy prone, but I did have something akin to post-traumatic stress disorder from things happening in my life. And my story starts actually at age 2. I often say that the phenomena had an interest in me before I had an interest in it. And here's me toddling around on this little bike in the basement as a little kid. And my first memory in life is being 2 in my crib at night. I had not yet fallen asleep. And it was in the spring of 73. And a little gray guy walked into my room, walked up to the crib, stared down at me, and with big black eyes. I had no point of reference for this. When you think about, oh yeah, aliens are all in our culture nowadays. In 1973, they weren't. And so this little guy comes in, just looks at me down at the foot of my crib, and then after a few minutes of just looking down at me, walks out of the room. And that is my first memory in life. And it burned into my memory. This wasn't something that came back several years later. It stayed with me my whole life. And just to make it a little extra creepy, I was screaming for my parents shortly after this thing made its appearance in my room. to which my mother only responded, "Go back to sleep, go back to sleep." And I was not even yet asleep. Through my experiences, some of them have been very well recalled, as this one was, and some of them partially recalled. All of the stuff that happened to me when I was younger, I have pretty much full recall of, but the older ones sometimes had come across as kind of sketchy. So I had a series of regressions done with the state director of Michigan at the time in the early 90s. Her name was Shirley Coyne, and she was the head of MUFON International's uh, investigation of abductions at the time. And so she was a state licensed hypnotherapist. And so it was great. I got to have her regress me several times. Now, there's been a lot of questions. Are regressions reliable? And in this particular case, one of the things that she regressed me on, the very first thing she regressed me on, was this moment when I was age 2. I didn't remember any more than the being coming in and leaving the room. But what was curious is that under hypnosis, um, the foot of my crib was a flat board. And I remembered the foot of my crib being bars, like there were bars all the way around the crib. And I kept telling her during the hypnosis, I'm like, this is really strange because as much as I try to fight it, hypnosis is creating a flat board at the foot of my crib, not bars all the way around. And turns out when I went home, I was still living with my parents at the time. When I went home and I mentioned this to my parents, I lived in a house that was fairly open. You could talk about things like this blessedly. And my mom said to me, she goes, your crib did have a flat board at the foot of the crib, and that it was still actually up in the house attic. So right after dinner, I went up in the attic and there it was. The way that I tried my best to remember it, fighting hypnosis was wrong. And hypnosis would not allow me to remember it incorrectly. Hypnosis insisted on the correct version of this crib. So that really impressed me about the power of hypnosis and regression when it comes to these. If done properly, it can pull out details that are pretty compelling. My next memory in life is actually age 4. And this one was really strange. Aren't they all, right? So it was the afternoon. And let me say this about my family because it'll come up again, I think. I am the youngest of 5 boys, but there are 5 brothers, no sisters. My 2 oldest brothers have every bit as many strange encounters as I have. We could really go into a contest of who's had the strangest stuff happen to them. But the 2 brothers between us, brothers 3 and 4, me being brother 5, 3 and 4 between them, 0 unusual experiences. No experiences out of the ordinary at all. None of them have been around us and seen anything that the other brothers have seen. So very strange that the phenomena would go all in on 3 out of 5, but leave the other 2 brothers alone. So in my house, there was a sort of a rule that my mom set down, is that the stuff that was happening to my oldest brother is 11 years older than me, and the next one was 10 years older than me. And what my mom said to them was, never share your experiences with me until I was probably, I think, 13, something like that. They didn't want to affect me. They didn't want to scare me. However, I was telling stories like the one I'm about to share here at age 4. And the rule in the house was you could listen to me and, be kind to me and nice to me and say, oh, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing. And we're here for you. Those type of messages, but don't reciprocate and say that the same things or other things that were weird were happening to them too. And so setting the table back again for when I was age 4, all of my brothers at that point were in school. And so my dad was at work. So it was just me and my mom at home, and my mom was out digging weeds in the garden. At about 2 o'clock, I decided I wanted to take a nap. I walked into my room, climbed into bed, and the moment I got into bed, I was instantly paralyzed. Instantly. And then I had this feeling like somebody grabbed my chest and yanked. And what it did was it pulled me out of body. And it pulled me out of body kind of like you pull a handkerchief out of a pocket. Just foomp. And then I'm in my room in broad daylight with three little gray guys, and everything is hyper vivid in terms of what I can see. And I don't have this definite sense of the extent of my body because really I'm not in my body. And the beings seemed very happy that I was just sort of floating along with them. Back at that point in my life, they tended to be more friendly, less businesslike, and they wanted to play a game with me. So we went out into the hallway. I lived in a tri-level home, and I was on the top floor of the tri-level. So there were 6 stairs going down into the TV room, as we called it. And the beings wanted to see if I can float down the stairs into the TV room. So I sort of lowered my sense center down, and it in a way that was almost like going down on my stomach, but obviously out of body. And so, yeah, I floated down the stairs, and then I ended up landing in the TV room, sort of in a falling leaf pattern. And they were all excited. They were like, wow, that's great. You know, you did it and everything. I'm like, wow. Yeah. And like, I'm going to tell my mom. And they're like, oh, no, 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 no. Don't tell anybody. This is between us. And I thought that was really strange. And so the next thing I knew, I'm paralyzed again. I can't see. And I'm slowly working my way out of paralysis in my bed. And I'm contemplating, I'm like, wow, they said not to say anything. Um, but but I went out of the bedroom. I went looking all over the house for them to see if they were still around. I didn't see them anywhere. And then so I decided to try the experiment on my own. So I went to the top of the stairs. Yep, got on my hands and knees and crawled down the stairs to try to reenact what I had just done. And yeah, it was not the same. Yeah, it wasn't quite the same, and I did not enjoy that at all. One of the more interesting things that happened to me was from age 7. And here's a picture of me from that age. I don't know how I got that bruise on my face, but my parents, I don't think it was them. My brothers, maybe. But so in this particular experience, I was 7, laying in my bed when I looked up and there was this black hole in the ceiling. And I'm trying to figure out what that was all about. And then this metal cable dropped out, a single metal cable dropped out of the hole and started whipping around really fast. And as it whipped around really fast, this sort of electricity built around it. And I could feel this real static electrical charge around me. And everything just, the energy was just going bonkers. And then suddenly I'm in a room with 2 little gray guys. And this room, I have the map up here on the screen as best as I could represent it. There's what I call the entrance room here. It's a very small room, and there was something like a black light in there. It was, a bluish purple light, and they informed me that I was being, what's the word? Like not inoculated, but they were making sure that I was clean enough through this light in that room to be able to enter into the rest of the craft. And once they were satisfied with that, the 2 little beings led me into the next room, and there it was very much like a doctor's office. The bed in the middle was a slab. It wasn't anything fancy. It didn't look comfortable at all. But I got the impression like, oh, they're going to want me to lay on this bed. I'm in some sort of doctor's visit. There's 3 little gray guys in there just kind of doing their own thing. And I was surprised that I was able to move around on my own, that they somehow didn't seem to be phased that I had the liberty to just sort of hang out in the room. And then, surprisingly, they all left. I'm in this room called what I call the processing room here. And the three little guys went through the door here on the bottom of the screen. So I'm like, okay, if they went through that door, I'm going to go through the opposite door. So I went out this other door and I'm in this hallway, and it's a long curving hallway. And then I got to this sort of closet like room. And when I looked in it, there was some big metal contraption. To me, it felt like a furnace or, some kind of thing like that. I couldn't tell what it was. But when I turned around and looked back, the three little gray guys I found actually followed me down the hallway. And they were just watching to see what I would do. And so now I'm like, okay, they got me. And then they wanted me to go through this door here that I label here as the examination room. And I went through the door, and there was a taller gray being in there. The gray beings that I was used to seeing were about 3 feet tall. And now this one's about 5 feet tall. Looked just like the littler ones, but seemed to have more, seemed to be more like people. It seemed to be able to interact with people with a level of understanding that the little ones didn't have, and very much felt like a doctor type, and wanted me to sit in this chair that was very similar, I would say, to a dentist's chair. And I sat in the chair, and while there were no straps or anything, I found myself stuck in this chair. And I'm looking around, I'm like, what's going on? And the being then gets right in my face with his big black eyes and says, "Be very good, and you'll get to see the color blue." And I'm like, as a kid, you want sticker or soccer, obviously, the little treats you get from the doctor's office. And I get to see the color blue for being good. Okay, what's going on here? And then I felt a very sharp pain in my right arm. And I look down and I see a cut on my arm. I don't know what caused the cut, but it's there. And as I'm looking at it, it's healing up right as I watch. And I'm like, that's strange. So then when I look back up at the creature, it again has its face in mine. And now it's got bright blue eyes. Its eyes switch to a bright cerulean, glowing blue. And with those eyes, um, I felt tranquilized, mesmerized, relaxed, and I just fell into this sort of dreamy state from the effect that this thing's eyes was enacting on me. And then I woke up. I woke up in a cold sweat, and it was daytime. And I look over at my arm, and there was a scar there. I know this isn't a very clear picture of it, but I still have the scar still to this day that I got from age 7 in this encounter. Now, this encounter actually wasn't even over yet, because that afternoon I was playing with my friend who lived across the street. He was 6, he was a grade behind me, and we're in my backyard climbing trees when this mist rolls into the backyard. It looks like a cloud. It looks like a fire or something. Just like this cloud rolls into the backyard, and as it hit me, it has a cool sort of effect like a fog machine. And in the mist, a little gray guy comes up to me and asks me telepathically, because that's how they always communicate. He communicates with me telepathically. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then the being seems satisfied and continues to walk. And the mist is centered on him. He has this cloud around him. I can't begin to say how the physics of that works, but he walked into the backyard of the next door neighbor, and he kept walking until I couldn't see the cloud anymore. He walked off. And while my the neighbor boy who was playing with me, he didn't see the being in the cloud. He very much remembers it, and we've communicated about it even recently as a couple of years ago, how strange that was, this mist rolling through the backyard. He knows my side of the story, and yeah, he definitely was an additional witness to at least that aspect of it. Very strange. So while I say that my one brother, two of my brothers didn't have any experiences the way that I had them, I was kind of amused at this particular one. It was a very snowy winter in the 1980s. I was 9 years old, and we had these hills of snow that were shoveled that were big enough so that you could sled down them for a second. And so I just kept climbing up these little hills and sledding down them again and again. And I had one of those orange sleds that was indestructible, and I still have the sleds actually. And so I go down this little bump in the front yard hill, and I'm now laying on my back on the sled because I'm a little bit tuckered out from doing it over and over again. And as I'm looking up at the sky, I see a star zigzagging across the sky very quick, and it seems to be avoiding the other stars that were visible in the sky. Like it was as if this were somehow a 2D plane, and the star was zigzagging to avoid the other stars, which is impossible, obviously, because these stars are light years apart and all this. And I'm freaking out. So I go and I run up to the door, and the only other person that was home at the time was one of my brothers who'd never had an experience. And I'm knocking on the door. I'm like, open the door, open the door. And decided he was actually playing a joke on me, and he decided to lock me out just to be funny. And so I'm banging on the door. I'm like, there's a UFO out here. You got to see it. You got to see it. And he thought, oh, you got to do better than that. You got to do better than that. So I'll open the door. And he never came out. And by the time he just decided to open the door, he realized that I was serious, and he had missed out on possibly seeing something that would have really allowed him to join the club, so to speak. Okay. So just showing you sort of an updated picture of me as I started to get into my teen years, just to show you what kind of a strange family we lived in. We drank both Coke and Pepsi, as you can see. And no, those cigarettes are not mine. So just as my age started to turn into the early teens, the nature of the experiences started to turn as well. As I hit puberty, there was a distinct difference in the encounters that I was having. They were very interested in me physically now, and my body, and doing things to my body that wasn't the case before. I'm covering nearly everything that had happened to me in my youth. There are a couple outlier stories that, if you're interested in picking up the book, you'll pick up a couple extra stories that I don't include here, but I'm touching on the big ones. So my time as a teenager was spent in fear of these things coming to get me. This is a map of my room. If it looks really cluttered, then I did a good job creating this map, because that was the intent of it, of this setup that I had in my teen years. So you can see where the bed is, where I slept. And on the opposite side of the room, on the opposite wall on the left, is the door into the room. And I play drums. So I had a snare drum stick that I would put behind the dresser and by the door, so that if anybody tried to open the door, it wouldn't open all the way. And from there, I'll usually had the lights. Well, I always had the lights on, and I would either have the TV or the radio on to keep me company. And I had a floor fan in there that would blow air on me, so that if I did eventually fall asleep, the air current on me would tell me if somehow that air current was blocked and if somebody was in the room. I also made sure that the shades were closed on the window. Even in summer, I kept the windows completely closed and the shades shut. And then the floor of the room was a complete obstacle course, just covered with all sorts of stuff on the floor, which, although my parents were aware that I was claiming strange things were happening, they had a hard time believing that I kept my room messy intentionally to keep from getting abducted. But and it didn't work. The room obstacle course didn't work, nor did the excuse work for my parents. They they didn't believe that they thought I was just saying that so that I wouldn't have to clean the room. And we had a little dog. She looked like Benji from the old Benji movies. And sometimes she would be in the room with me. That added just a little bit more comfort. But none of this mattered. None of this mattered at all. They were coming to get me through my teen years, sometimes more than once in a week, but on a fairly regular basis. I think the longest I went without an encounter might have been like about 2 months. And just again and again and again, taking me over and over again, leaving me with just vague memories of some sort of medical stuff going on, and not really figuring out what was going on, losing a lot of sleep, getting very upset with these beings. And that would come to a head in a few years, and I'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things that I was doing during that time is trying to take in content that I felt spoke to my experiences, one way to put it. And on Sunday nights, there was a radio program called Psychically Speaking. And the host of the show was this guy, Marcello. And he would talk about whatever paranormal subjects were big at that moment. He would have guests on, special guests. And then he would often close out the show with doing psychic readings for people who would call in. So one day on his show, he's talking about Moldavite. And it's this, if you're familiar with Moldavite, it's this greenish stone that is actually extraterrestrial in nature. It crashed into, at the time, Czechoslovakia's Moldau Valley, and that's why it's called Moldavite. And on the show, he's saying, wow, this stone, he had a chance to hold some of it. He says it has a very high vibration, a very warming vibration. And I was never really a big crystal guy at any point in my life. You know, a lot of these things that are sort of on the new age tip, I dabbled in a little bit, but never really was a serious student of anything. So in this case, Moldavite was pretty much my experience with the whole crystal uh, thing. And so I got some of this Moldavite. I went to a store. It was called Crystal Corner. And I went with a friend of mine in high school. And I was about 16 at this time. I remember I could drive, so I was at least 16. And so we go into the store and I hold some of the stuff that they had, and I agreed. It had a tingle to it, it had a warmth to it, it was felt energizing. So I bought some of it and I brought it home and I kept it on the shelf in my bedroom here, where you see it says inset desk and bookshelf. Up on the top shelf, which was built into the wall, is where I would keep it. And I would sometimes try amateur attempts of meditation with it. I really didn't know what I was doing. But one night I had a dream where a shadowy figure came into the room and stole my Moldavite. This was not, I would call, an experience. This is something I would put into the category of dreams. So this thing came and it took the Moldavite, and when I woke up, I decided then, yeah, of course I'm going to go check to see if that Moldavite's still there. And it was not there. I knew that it was there. There was no chance that it could have gotten knocked down. We had a dog and a cat at the time, and neither of them could make it up there. So somehow it was missing. So I thought, well, that's strange. And then after a couple weeks, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get another one. And so I did. I went back to the store and I got it. And this time, every night I put it in my pillowcase. And at night I'd put it in the pillowcase. I'd wake up, I'd take it out. So one night I put it in my pillowcase, and when I woke up, it was no longer in my pillowcase. I checked all over the bed. It was deep into the pillowcase too. So there was no way that it was just gonna slide out very easily, and it was missing. So I'm like, darn it, I felt like it was a challenge now. Like, okay, you guys think you're going to keep taking this from me. And I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I was working at Taco Bell, making that, minimum wage money. And so I'm like, okay, I can't afford to keep this up, but I am going to get one more. I'm going to try this again. So I go and I get a third piece from Crystal Corner. I come home and I'm the only one home. I pull into the driveway with my new Moldavite, and it's a very telltale shape. It's got a shark tooth shape to it. And unlike the previous pieces I had, this one had a little brown fleck in it. And and it was an old plastic baggie, as they tend to come. So I step into the house. I set the Moldavite on the bookshelf inside, just inside the house, and I go to the bathroom. I come out, and it's gone. There was nowhere it could have gone. I was only in the bathroom for like a minute. Come in the house, put the thing on the counter, go to the bathroom, come out, it's missing. So I'm like, okay, you got me. You got me. What am I gonna do? I don't have the budget to keep buying these things for you guys to keep taking them and doing whatever with them. And I didn't know who was taking them. I didn't know what was happening. I mean, I blamed it on the gray guys, but I mean, really, just because that was the only context I had of weird things happening. I really have no idea what happened with this. So several years later, it was 1993. I think it was about 6 years after the Moldavite disappeared. The family was moving out of the house, and basically everybody was going their own separate ways. And it was 2 days again before the final day that we were leaving, and everything in my room was in boxes, and the room was all cleaned up and everything, ready to go. I go across the hallway into the bathroom. I come back, and on the dresser, where there was absolutely nothing there a moment ago, was the Moldavite. Not just any Moldavite. It was the Moldavite that I bought, the third piece that I bought and put by the front door, and came back and it was missing when I was the only one home. I could tell it was the same piece because it had that same shark tooth shape with the brown fleck in it that I remembered so well. So it was as if it was saying that, okay, he's moving. Oh my gosh, he's only going to be here another couple of days. Let's get this back to him now. And I have no idea. The whole thing makes no sense to me whatsoever, except a strange thing started to happen is when I started to tell people about this, people started to tell me, like, yes, mine disappeared too. And I would go all over the place, tell the story, and people would tell me stories about it, their own Moldavite disappearing. Very rarely coming back, most of the time just simply disappearing. I remember once I was at a store and I saw some guy and he had a Moldavite necklace. And I said to him, like, oh, nice Moldavite necklace. And he goes, yeah, this one's actually my girlfriend's. He goes, mine disappeared right after I got it. Strangest thing. But he's like, I'm wearing hers. And I'm like, yep, that's my memory too. So yeah, that is its own track of weirdness, I suppose. But again, my teen years, I really started to resent these beings coming. I wasn't getting seemingly anything from it. I was losing sleep. I was terrified. This isn't the type of thing you go to school the next day for comfort and tell your friends, hey, guess what? I had a really bad night last night. I was taken again. There were a couple close friends that I could share, but most of the people like did not. I mean, it would not be helpful to have this sort of get out. And I was a normal kid in my high school years. I was on the soccer team, yearbook. I played soccer and was in a band. Just all sorts of normal stuff. But this continued to happen to me. And one night when I was in my later teens, I woke up to being walked down one of those rounded corridors. And the little gray guys were all around me. I'm like, okay, gosh, where are we going? What's going on? And they brought me before a being that was to me looked like a giant praying mantis in a tacky, cheap robe. That's the best way I'll put it. But this thing was like about 7 feet tall. It had very powerful energy that it was emanating. It was really terrifying to be in its presence. And to me, the feeling that I got from my time being in high school, it felt like the little guys brought me to the principal. That would be the analogy I could think of. They brought me to the principal of the school to scare me. And the being said, started to lecture me telepathically, saying that I was being troublesome by not going along with the program, although not offering any details of what this program was. And it said to me, just go along with it and you'll start to see the benefits. And I just didn't, while I was thoroughly scared, I wasn't convinced that I should go along with the program. And I continued to resist through my teen years. And what I thought was interesting and really revelatory was, up until this point, we're talking, I'm getting into the late 80s now, is that I didn't read any of the abduction books yet. Bud Hopkins had, Missing Time out already. But I was not aware of that. This whole sort of alien UFO thing really didn't hit its cultural mark yet. And I was just left wondering, what the heck is going on? I see these little gray guys, I see these tall mantis guys. Something's happening, and I can't quite figure it out. And I didn't know how alone I was in this experience until I had what a lot of people have is their communion moment. The first time they walked into a bookstore and they saw Whitley Strieber's Communion there on the shelf. And yeah, I remember the shock that I had when I walked into trying to remember what bookstore it is. It's no longer in business. Gosh, it'll come to me maybe, but so I walk in and sure enough, it's there on the shelf, and I'm freaked out. I'm like, I don't know if I looked at the back and I looked in a little bit of the sleeve, what it's about, and I'm like, could this have something to do with what's happening to me? And I asked for the book for my birthday, and so I got it in for my birthday in 1987. So was that the year again? No, 88. I was going to say 88 because I had some experiences before that. Pardon me with my timeline. But so I was 17. It was my 17th birthday. I got this. And I set a record for myself by reading this book in 2 days. I flipping the pages. I'm like, yes, that happened to me. Yes, that happened to me. Yes, that happened to me. No, that didn't happen to me. No, yes, that happened to me. And then when I got to the part in the book where he's talking about these mantis beings, and he calls them mantis beings, I was like, what the heck? Not only was he seeing the same thing that I had seen, but he called it the same thing. And in fact, one time during that weekend that I read the whole book, I accidentally kicked the blanket off my bed and I screamed. And my parents came running in and they're like, what's the matter? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I was reading a scary book. And they both had this look on their face like, what? But so anyway, I finished the book. And one of the things I was really hoping for the book was comfort, some answers. And what I got from the book was context. It felt like what was happening to me was what he was describing in his book, but it didn't really offer any solace. There was no feel good ending. Like, this is what you got to do to protect yourself or get over it or anything like that. It was just like scary, scary, scary. Okay, the book's done. And so when the second book came out, which was actually not long after that, Transformation, I asked for that for Christmas, and I got the book for Christmas. And unlike Communion, that I read the book over the course of a weekend, I was reading this book very slowly, very slowly. And I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm nearly done with this book. Okay. And this doesn't look like it's going to be providing me many answers either. And as I did with communion, I did that sort of checklisting, like, yes, this happened to me. No, that didn't happen to me. And there's a part in the book where the beings telepathically sort of give Whitley a download and say, come to the park. And he's like, wow, that was an external telepathic message while I'm just sitting here in my house. And he does go to the park and he has an experience. So after I read that chapter, I'm like, well, that's one thing that at least has never happened to me. When then I got a download, as I know it to be commonly called now. This voice popped in my head, completely external, said, finish the book and we will prove to you that we exist. And I'm like, huh. And it stayed there. It was lodged there. And it clearly wasn't my own memory. It wasn't my own invention. It was something that was stuck there. And as I got closer and closer to the end of the book, I got to a point where I'm like, I don't think I want to finish this book. I don't know if I'm ready for what they want to show me in terms of proof, if there really is anything to that. So I got all the way up to the final chapter and I thought, well, as long as I don't read the last chapter, I'm safe. And then one night, oddly enough, I had a dream that I read the last chapter. What a weird thing to dream about. But so when I woke up, it was Saturday morning, and I was like, okay, I am going to read the last chapter. And it was February of 1989 at this point, and I was a high school senior. And so I read the last chapter of the book early in the morning, and I'm like, okay, now what? What's going to happen now? I got really nervous, didn't know what was going to happen next, but the whole day I'm like, I don't want to be alone. I do not want to be by myself while on this particular day. And so here's a picture of me, how I looked at the time, on the left. And on the right is a group of my friends that I very cleverly disguised their identities. And so that night I hung out with my friends Kyle and Don. They're the ones that are bookending me. I'm the one that's looking down at the ground here. And so the three of us were hanging out in the evening, and we went to we were going to get another friend of ours at 9 o'clock when she got off of work. So we pull up in front of her place at 9 o'clock. Again, it's February, so it's already dark out. We're just kind of waiting there in my friend Kyle's Chevette, when about the height of two telephone poles, this blue ball of light, about the size of a car, slowly just drifts over the car, just floats right over the car. And then when that disappeared, this white ball of light came and zigzagged all over the sky really quickly. And then that disappeared. And then a red ball of light appeared in the center of the sky, grew to about the size of a full moon, and then shrank and disappeared. So full moon meaning very large, right? And the three of us are like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? What's going on? And my friend Kyle says, we should tell the police. And I'm like, we're high school seniors, going to call the police and tell them we saw a UFO. I'm like, good luck with that. And Don says, yeah, don't, we shouldn't do that. And then he says, but the Air National Guard base isn't that far from here, Selfridge Air National Guard base. Maybe we should tell them. I'm like, okay, so you're not going to tell the police, but you're going to tell the military? So we didn't tell anybody for several years until I discovered MUFON. I shared my story, and then that's how I got involved with MUFON. But back to that night, I'm like, oh my gosh, they said that if I finish a book, they would prove to me that they exist. So here I am, the very day I finished that book, them displaying themselves is not some vague paranormal thing, but very clearly UFO related in their nature. And it wasn't just me. There were two other witnesses that saw it as well. And both of these guys are still friends in my life. I still see them on a semi-regular basis. And for added proof, the next day I went into work. At that time, I was working at Burlington Coal Factory. And I went up to my coworker, Melissa, and I said, you'll never guess what I saw last night. And she goes, oh, did you see the UFO? Which is not what I expected her to say, right? And she says that our maintenance man at the building, he saw a blue UFO last night. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she went to him. And he said, yeah, he saw this blue ball of light floating down his street the previous night. Didn't see the white light or the red light, just the blue light. And I go back to Melissa and I say, oh my gosh. I said, yeah, I saw, you know, and I sort of, I started to share my experience and I noticed she was tearing up. And I said, I asked her what the matter was. And she shared this story with me that she grew up in Tennessee. And when she was a little girl, this one night, her and her sister, when they were both really young, were in the back seat of a car. Parents were in the front seat. They're driving down some dirt road, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, when they saw like a 30-foot disc parked in the field next to the road, had these glowing lights all over it. And her father was like, "Oh, let's go check it out." And the mom and her and her sister were like, "What are you, crazy? Get out of here! Get out of here!" And they kept shrieking at him until he eventually left. But she said that what was even more terrifying than the thing being out there was that he was all about wanting to go get a closer look at it. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is, it kept poking me, poking me, poking me. Yes, see, we proved to you that we exist and we're a UFO thing, say not a ghost thing or a cryptid thing or some other sort of thing. This is all structured in the way that I was receiving it through the viewpoint of, say, like a Whitley Strieber, and then going on to read Bud Hopkins' book and a number of other books and saying, yes, this is the type of thing that's happening to me. And one of the things, though, that I took away from this is that this was the first time that they sort of gave back, where they did something seemingly for me. Everything that had happened up until that point in my life was them just doing whatever with me whenever they wanted. And this was a time where they, said, here, we'll show you something. So a couple months would be the summer actually of 89 is when this started. I was in my kitchen and it was about 3 a.m. I was a dedicated night owl at the time because it was not safe to go to sleep. And so I would often it's like just stay up as late as possible. And when the sun started to come up, I would feel safe and then I would go back to sleep. And I've been a night owl my whole life, really. And so this one particular night, I'm sketching in my sketchbook and I get the very distinct feeling that they're in the backyard. And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, I don't want to have an experience now. And unlike other times where I'd say like been in my bed most of the time, here I am up and about, fully awake and moving around, and the onset of this experience is happening. So I says to them, I'm like, I don't want to see you if you're here. And I knew they were in the backyard. And I said, but if you call me on the phone, I'll answer and we can talk that way. It was a really pathetic sort of defense mechanism. Like, I don't want to see you, just call me on the phone. And here's an actual picture of my house at the time and the actual phone. And so I waited, I backed myself up into some of the drawers of the kitchen and I'm looking around, waiting to see if they were going to come in from through the wall, the window, some other entrance. And the phone rings. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And by this time it's going on nearly 4 a.m. And the phone rings. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I asked for. Should I answer the phone? I didn't expect them to actually call. And so I'm waiting there and I'm like, should I do it? Should I not? It only rang the one time. And then when I got up enough courage, I went and I picked up the phone and it was a dial tone. So I hung up. And the next day, afterwards, right at that moment, right after I hung up the phone, I could feel their presence dissipate. There's always this real energy boost sort of in the atmosphere when they're around. You could sense them. There's something not quite right. And it's a sort of an anxiousness that you have. And that all sort of went away right after I hung up the phone. I could tell that they were leaving. So I'm like, okay, good. So the next day, I'm sitting in my backyard saying, oh my gosh, I should have answered the phone. This was like, what an opportunity this would have been. You know, they listened to me again. They listened to me that I didn't want to see them. And they were offering me the gift that they would call me on the phone, but I didn't answer. And a year went by and I continued to have things happen occasionally. But the summer of 1990, I am again in the kitchen and again starting to feel there. It's about 3 in the morning, sketching at the table, completely like what had happened the year before. And I can sense their presence again in the backyard. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, they're back. This is this situation again. Okay, this is time for a redo. I said, if you're here, I don't want to see you, but please call on the phone and I'll answer this time. So I get up and I back up against the drawers again and I'm waiting. And it was very quickly after that that the phone, sure enough, rang again. And I'm like, I am not going to think about this. I am just going to answer. So I just dash for the phone right away. Phone rings. I'm already in motion, running for the phone. And I pick it up. And again, it's a dial tone. And I hang up. But this time it didn't feel like they left. It felt like they were still around. And I'm getting really nervous at this point because where I had this strong sense of them being in the backyard, essentially knowing that they're there without seeing them, the fact that the phone rang was a true indicator that something was going on. So I decided to get my little Benji dog, Sammy was her name, for comfort. And so when I got her, she was laying on my parents' bed. I did not want to wake my parents. But when I got her, she's like, "Oh, we're going outside? We're gonna go for a walk?" Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 that's not what I meant. I just wanted you to be with me for some sort of comfort." But she totally took it like we're going out. And I started to think at that point, well, I know they say that dogs are sensitive to this sort of phenomena. And if she's not freaking out, maybe it's safe. So a lot of times you could just let her out in the backyard and she'll do her business. But I'm like, no, I'm not going anywhere near the backyard. Let's go out the front. So I go out the front door and she runs to the curb. And so I go follow her. And while she's doing her business, I look back and over the house, this is artwork done by Mike Clellan. And as I look back over the house, this is a great representation of my house. This looks like the house I grew up in. So when I look back, I see this really bright spherical shaped cloud over the house. It's not a UFO or it's not or whatever. It just looks like a cloud, except that it's a perfect disc shape and it's glowing. And so my dog doesn't seem to be really paying it much attention. And as I'm looking at this cloud, it suddenly starts moving away. It's the only cloud in the sky, and then boom, it shoots off at this tremendous speed. And I'm like, wow, uh, that's really something. So at that point, the energy started to lower, and I'm like, okay, things are safe again. And yet, still, when I went back in the house, I waited until the sun came up before I went to sleep. The next day, the very next day, my mom knocks on the door. It's about noon. I'm still in bed asleep because I stayed up all night. And she says, "Oh, your friend Kyle is here." So I'm like, okay. So I go out and I see Kyle on the porch. And at this point, I'm out of high school and I'm just freely telling my close friends whatever happened. And they would be involved in some of the stuff too. here and there. So, I told Kyle what happened the previous night, and and you got to admit it's hard to comfort somebody who's experiencing something that's sort of outside what you're used to experiencing like this. But he was like, "Oh, okay, okay, whatever." And then he goes, "But anyway, so our friend John is going to have a birthday party coming up, and I was wondering, are you available on the day that his birthday party is?" Our friend John here. So anyway, so I'm like, "Yeah, John's birthday party." And then I asked him then, and it was strange. It was almost like not me asking it, but I'm like, "Is Vicky gonna be there?" This friend of ours, Vicky. And he says, he goes, "That sounds probably right. They're friends too." And then he's like, "Oh, were you thinking of asking her out?" I said, "She's gonna be my girlfriend." And I had never even thought of her that way before. I had never thought like, okay, she and I are, I never pined for her or wondered what it would be like to be in a relationship with her or something like that. I just knew that we were going to have this connection. And sure enough, at John's birthday party, we played croquet, and it was just the luck of the draw that she was attached to me as my partner in the game, and started talking and then exchanged phone numbers, and then we were dating. And the following several months, this was in the summer of 1990. So over this the course of several months, we got very close, and it was seemingly a reasonably good relationship. And fast forward to January of 1991, after she and I had been dating about 6 months, and I had this very strange experience. I woke up walking down this what would be a dirt road, except it was winter and there was snow all around and it was cold. I find myself walking down this road, and I'm looking around at all the houses. All the houses are dark, and I'm like, what's going on here? And so as I'm approaching this one house, I'm like completely freaked out because how did I get here? I'm not wearing a coat. I'm just trudging down this road that I don't recognize. It seems like I'm someplace fairly rural, and I come up to this one house. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go maybe knock on the door and see if anybody's awake there and can help me out. And as I got close to the house, then I see in the driveway this little gray guy. And when I look at it, its eyes this time turned from black to white, and it felt like I got hit in the head with like a sledgehammer. And I felt, the best way to put it is, I felt every negative emotion a person can feel all at once. Besides, say, fear, anger, shame, regret, put a name on it, any sort of negative emotion. Um, it was it was landing on me heavily, and it felt like I exploded. That's the best way to put it, is that I detonated. And when I came to my senses, um, I found myself laying in my bed at home, and there was a knock on the door, and it was my mom. And I'm like, "What's going on?" I look, and it's like 2 p.m. and it's daylight. I'm like, I was just physically in that location. This was not a dream. This was not a lucid dream. This was not a vivid dream. I was just physically there. This just physically happened to me. And so anyway, so she comes in, she drops this letter on my chest. And everything I'm bringing up here, obviously, I hope you can understand, ties in with all the weird things that have happened to me in my life and the journey that I'm going on. I'm not just like waxing nostalgic here, right? So anyway, so my mom comes in, she drops this letter on my chest and walks out of the room. She doesn't even say anything. So I look at the letter, and it's from Vicky, and it's a Dear John letter. And I say, oh, it was great, the last few months, but that's me, it's not you, or whatever it said. And so all I'm thinking as I read this letter is the creature, that thing in my experience that I just had, the creature, that's all that's running through my head. And as my eyes are scanning down this letter, um, at the end, she says, you can call me if you want. And I'm like, oh, an imperative, something I can do. So I go and I pick up the phone, and I'm just a complete trance right now. I'm just thinking the creature, the creature, the creature. So I call her up, and she's like, oh, hey, and she's like, is this Bill? And I'm like, yes. And I'm thinking the creature. And she's like, oh, did you get my letter? Yes, the creature. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry. She goes, I sent that on Friday, and I had a change of heart over the weekend because we had a good time over the weekend. So hopefully it's okay if we're still together. I'm like, yes. And really all I'm thinking is the creature. And she goes, oh, can you come over tonight? I'm like, yes. That's the entire thing I said to her over and over in this conversation. Yes. Can you come over? Yes. See you at 7? Yes. And then I hung up. And then as the day started to go on, I'm like, what the hell just happened? Not just from this thing, but with her and this letter and what's going on. And so I ended up going over there later, and I didn't tell her about what I had been through because she actually was not very receptive to that part of my life. I sort of went in toes going first approach, and she's like, nah, I'm not interested in that stuff. So anyway, so I'm like, well, that's so that's weird. So we're back together, and the whole thing was just really odd to me. So a little bit later, and this would be towards this happened in January of 96. Towards the end, pardon me, 91. Towards the end of 91, my friend Kyle came to me, and he said, he's the tall one, sort of in the khaki here. He's like, I just wanted to let you know that after you broke up with Vicky, oh yeah, Vicky and I went out until the summer of 91. And then we just sort of had an amicable split. No big deal. So then Kyle says, I wanted to let you know that after you were dating Vicky, I actually dated her for a couple months, and I didn't tell you about it. I'm like, well, that's strange. I'm like, I guess you could have told me. It wasn't a big deal. And he's like, well, you think that's bad? He goes, our friends Dave and Herb, they were dating her, Don and Herb, this down here on the right, and Herb's on the left. He's like, they were actually both dating her while you were dating her. Now these guys were my like core friends, closest friends in the world. And one of my closest friends tells me, you think it was bad I was dating her while you were dating her. Your other two close friends in our group of friends were dating her while while you were dating her. I'm like, who else knew about this? And it turns out just about everybody in our group of friends knew about this. Like Vicky and I would show up to parties, and everyone would know. And everyone I asked, I said, how come you didn't tell me about this? They're like, oh, I didn't want to be the one to hurt you. I'm like, this is just really, really weird. I just need to back the heck away from this entire group of friends. And then I started to think back at that experience I had with the little gray guy. And I thought, well, maybe they were trying to warn me somehow, because it turns out when I got that Dear John letter, that was the beginning of when her and Herb were starting to go out, when I started to get a backfilled storyline. And like maybe they were just saying, this is going to be rough on you, but we're here for you. I don't know. It was really tough to interpret. But I started to think, okay, I'm my whole friend thing just blew apart. So at least these little gray guys have my back. I don't know. So I started to feel out of it, but I started to project good feelings towards these beings because of the niceties they had showed me by saying, you know, finish a book will prove to you that we exist. I don't want to see them. They're going to call me, and they did. Maybe this was another thing. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're handing out olive branches. And so, you know, I just was trying to emanate, you know, thoughts to them that, hey, you know, thanks for doing everything you did. I appreciate it. And then one night they show up in my bedroom. This was a really interesting one. And I wake up and there's this nude girl in the room with me. I was, this was, I'm trying to think, it was in the early 90s. And I have it all down very specifically in my journal. I haven't done this presentation in a while or thought of the exact dates. But anyway, so I'm in my bed and this nude girl is in front of me and she looks very afraid. And I look behind her and there's these three little gray guys. And I wasn't getting any sort of sexual tension or whatever from it. I just felt really bad that it appeared clear that the little gray guys took some girl, brought her into my room without clothes. And so I'm looking at the beings now. There was no fear in this moment either for me. But I said to the little gray guys, I'm like, you know, like what's going on? And there was no response. And I said, you know, why are you bringing this girl like this? And they responded like, oh, she belongs with us. So you don't have to worry about it. It's, you know, and so I'm thinking like, oh, is she a hybrid? Is this what's going on? And I started to get these sort of, you know, this affirmation. They just wanted to make me not feel bad about the situation. So I think, you know, they were really just feeding me that line. And to whatever degree she's associated with them, you know, they were just feeding me a line. So I didn't feel bad. And so then I said, okay, so what's her name? And I'm asking them because she's just there kind of out of it, not having it. And they said, yes, what's her name? Like they wanted me to name her. So I said, Angel, because it sounded nice, you know, what an angel. And they're like, yay, you know, they were clearly telepathically excited that I had named her. And then the four of them, the three gray beings and the girl, shifted left. They didn't walk, they didn't turn. They were like on a conveyor belt, and they all just sort of moved out left through the wall outside. And so I thought, you know, what the heck is going on with that? And in retrospect, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe they're trying to find friends for me because I had such a crummy relationship with my other friends. And that was, you know, that was I actually am still sticking to that they were doing something for my benefit in that respect. But at, you know, my early 20s were an interesting odd time as well with other things happening. I had one night where I was asleep on the couch. Still, this is the early 90s, and I'm still living at home with my parents. This is before we moved out in 93. And a lot of times, instead of being in my bedroom where I felt kind of trapped, I would sleep on the couch in the TV room because at least I felt I had some mobility there that I could run if I needed to. Um, and so I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. And when I woke up, the TV was off, which is not strange because sometimes my mom would turn off the TV if she saw me sleeping there and just let me sleep. But I'm laying there and feel this sort of warmth wash over me and then this bright light wash over me coming from the window. And there was a spotlight that kept going through the room and looking over at everything. I'm like, what's this spotlight in the room? I didn't actually feel any nervousness at that moment. and I didn't hear anything outside like a helicopter or anything like that. And this was also during the summer, so um, I felt okay. I'm going to walk outside and see what's going on. And as I step out on the porch, I see these black triangle craft with little white lights at the bottom, three little white lights at the bottom of them, zipping around the sky really fast, sometimes doing these crazy turns and just going back and forth, back and forth. So I walk out, and as they come over the house, sometimes they would shoot a spotlight at the house. And so I'm just kind of dazzled by these things, looking up at the sky, when suddenly I had that feeling that there was their presence and that I was being watched. And my eyes sort of drifted down, and I saw in the front yard there was a domed shaped craft with one of these beings coming out of the craft holding a little black box. And I'm like, oh gosh, were they trying to trick me to come outside looking at these lights? And now I came outside and here I am facing this little gray guy. And so I'm like, nope. And so I turn around and I start running back towards the house. And as this thing is approaching, it kept saying to me, you have to look in the book, look in the book, please look in the book, which was that box, whatever it had. And as I got inside the house, I passed out right when I got inside. And then the next morning when I woke up, I was in my bed and not really sure, not really clear what happened there. So even this is one of the times where I went to George and Shirley's place, and this is George and Shirley's place, to ask them, to help me figure out through regression what had happened to me. Now, George was the regional director for MUFON at the time, and Shirley, again, she was state director and also head of abductions. And this is an actual picture of their home. I took this picture after I was going over to their house on a regular basis, so I have no idea why the current owners installed a door outside the railing here. So no idea. That looks like a kind of a thing that AI would do nowadays. But yeah, so when I took a picture, I have no idea what it is. Anyway, so Shirley, yeah, she regressed me half a dozen times, and she was able to pull little bits of detail out of things that had happened to me. But in all of the cases where there was regression involved, it built some little details around the events that had happened to me, but I didn't have any experience where I remembered nothing and regression pulled out an entire episode with me. That didn't happen. So it was the last time that I was going to George and Shirley's place. And Shirley had me sit in the lazy boy chair that she had in her little office. And um, and she said, as she started to regress me, she says, okay, I want you to just go back to any memory that feels strong, anything that you feel that you need to investigate. And as I started to, I'm in my deep trance at this point. Anything that I tried to focus on, I had great difficulty doing so. It was as if somebody was blocking my memory, like actively blocking my memory of things. I'm like, well, this is frustrating. And then while I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do next, everything started to turn really bright, really white. Suddenly I felt I was surrounded by this brilliant white light all around me. And I'm sitting in the chair, trying to figure out what's going on, and my body's feeling lighter and lighter and lighter. And then it felt like I was just sort of floating out in space, basically, this big white space. And this voice comes to me um, and says, you always focus on the negative things. You never focus on the positive things. They're like, we're here with you and you're going to be okay. And we know that you're going to be okay because right now, from where we're at, we see the entirety of your life from beginning to end. And you are nervous because you wonder, here's a big, represent the big white light. So they're wondering, he says, the voice says to me, you're wondering if you have this fear that we're going to come back and visit you. But we're here to tell you, yes, we're going to come back and visit you again and again and again. So there's no need for you to have that question, because the answer is yes, we're going to come back and visit you, which isn't really particularly comforting, you would think. And so then the room starts to get darker and darker, and I start to feel heavier and heavier, and it feels like somebody slammed me back into the chair, and I was back at George and Shirley's place. And I open my eyes, and Shirley says to me, "Oh, we lost you there for a minute." And not knowing what to say immediately, I said, "Okay, I need to go to the bathroom." So I'm in the bathroom, and Shirley's in the sort of the front room here, and George was laying on the couch the entire time that we were in the separate room doing the regression. Again, I'm in the bathroom. In a home like this, obviously the walls are fairly thin, and I hear George say to Shirley, he's like, "There were 3 of them here." And Shirley's like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, there were 3 of them." He goes, "They showed up very shortly after you went into that room, and they stayed until you were almost done, and then they left." And she's like, "What did they do?" She goes, "They just stood there at the end of the hallway through your session." And I'm in the bathroom like, "Oh my gosh, this is, as crazy as what just happened to me." There's always that next thing that's layered on top of it. So I come out of the bathroom and I walk into the room with George and Shirley, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And then Shirley looks at me. She's like, "Oh, nothing." Like, I thought I heard you like maybe say something while I was in the bathroom. She's like, "Oh no, we're just talking about other stuff." And I'm like, I cannot stay here. This is just way too weird. So I left, and I that was the last time I saw them at their place. I just I it was far too strange for me to ever come back and try to revisit this, and they never shared any more details with me. And so I went home that night, and I got into bed, and I'm like, I don't think I need to have the light on. I don't think I need to have the TV or the radio on. I'm okay. And ever since that day, ever since that regression, I've been okay without needing an obstacle course or any sort of deterrent. That doesn't mean it's the last time by any stretch that they came, but I no longer needed any of those things. And I can't play pop psychologist and figure out why it worked in any respect, but it did. And so very shortly after this was when the Moldavite came back. And so I'm like, okay, these guys are, continuing to do strange little tokens of things for me while they're continuing to do what they really want to do, whatever program that they got going on. And then as time went on, I was still keeping my arm's length from a lot of that particular group of friends. So over time, I started to reacquaint myself with some of them, sort of work myself back into this group of friends. But I was not dating. That whole situation wrecked me on dating for several years. But so my friend John um, said, "Hey, do you want to come to my cabin?" There was a ski trip that was being planned for um, early 95. I can't remember if it was January or February, but very early 1995. So I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll come." And then he says, "Oh, just so you know, Vicky's coming." I'm like, "Come on." I'm like, "Come on, why would you invite me and then say that?" And so he said, "Well, maybe she'll blink. I'll tell her you're coming." And by this time, she's married, actually. And neither of us blink. We both say, okay, we're both coming. You know, I'm not going to back down from this, whatever happens. So here's the cabin. Here's John at the cabin. And here is Vicky from that weekend with her new husband. And her new husband is very difficult to be around. Just to give a couple examples, he decided to go shirtless all weekend. This is rare to see him wearing anything other than that. And I'm not one that anybody would appreciate going shirtless, but as you can tell, we really didn't appreciate her husband being shirtless for the most of the weekend. And he did little other fun things like we gave him beer money to go get beer, and he bought the cheapest beer the place had, so he could save, he could hold on to the rest of the money. So he's drinking Black Label here. And then another great moment that he had was our friend Mary made chicken soup, and after he was done eating his portion of soup, he poured the broth back into the pot. So this guy was a real something else. And I'm like, what am I doing here with her and this oaf? I'm like, you know, what is the whole point of this trip? What's going on? So it was Saturday night, and there were so many of us at the cabin that typically there's enough beds or enough places to throw a sleeping bag or something like that. And I'd been to this place before, but in this case, just about every bit of real estate was full with somebody wanting to sleep there. And I said, I don't mind. I can sleep in the bathroom during the winter. The water is shut off and everybody's got to use the outhouse or whatever. So there was a tub, and I said, that's fine. I can sleep in the tub. So I did that. So I there was some of the furniture, like the recliner padding from the chairs that they would have out in the summer available. So I put that as bedding in the tub, and that's what I slept in. So come Saturday night, it just so happened that this newlywed couple was in the room next to me. So I didn't mind sleeping there, but to hear them talk and giggle and all that stuff through the wall was a lot. And so that particular the night, they were talking, and then they were giggling, and then they were flirting, and then it was off to the races. The two of them were very loudly engaged in a lovemaking session, really just a couple feet from me on the other side of an understandably another thin wall. I'm like, and I'm like laying in a bathtub next to them, hearing this. I'm like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. You can't make this stuff up. I'm thinking, and I'm just laughing, and I start laughing so hard in the tub. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't stop laughing, I'm gonna wake everybody in the place up. So I run out of the bathroom and I run outside, and I'm just laughing my head off, running down the street laughing. And I didn't know the last time I actually felt that good. It was such a relief. This situation was so ridiculous. I could no longer take her seriously. And no longer being able to take her seriously meant that the weight was lifted off me. So anyway, so it's winter. I'm running down the road, and I'm like, this looks familiar. And so I look over, and I'm like, oh my God, it's that house. It's that house. I'm here. I am in that moment. I am not prepared for the winter. It's the middle of the night. I'm running down the same street, and there's that same house. This wasn't a house that I had ever seen before. There was no reason to go that far down the road from my friend's cabin. And as I went up to the house, I'm like, oh my gosh. And as I got up to the house, there was nobody there in the driveway. No little gray guy, nothing. But I realized then that I understood the whole arc of this was that when back in 1991, when I had that experience, that it was essentially saying, this is when I would lose all that negative baggage, that I would come to a point that it would close that and that circuit, and I could move on from there. And just here's a picture of the next day. So here is Vicky and her husband and a group of friends. You can see there was someone, and I was just having a time of my life. I was just completely this goofball here with the penguin's head on. That's me. I was just completely over like the whole ordeal, and found myself ready to date again. And my story's just about done right here, because when we're moving into 95, this is about where I'll wrap things up. But so like I'm like, that's great. I can date again. This is wonderful. And so a few short months later, I'm with this girl, Tammy, and these are actual pictures from the date that I'm describing. We're walking through this local park that's got trails and things like that. And she and I, this is May of 95, and she and I had started dating in March. And I had not yet told her about any of my experiences. And, when you start dating somebody who has, if you're an experiencer, an abductee, you don't want to lead with this necessarily, that you've been having these type of experiences, for obvious reasons. Like, oh, what do you do? I work here and I get abducted by aliens. That doesn't work out always. So I figure I'll give the relationship a couple months, and then I'll start to work it in. And you absolutely have to work it in, because at some point, if somebody's going to be that close to you for that long, they're going to be around you when something happens. And you want to the best of your ability, sort of prepare them for the possibility that an encounter could happen with them there. So I had not yet done this in May. And anyway, we go to this park. We're walking around through the daytime, and then we find this hill, which is the actual hill you see here climbing up here, where we decide to watch the sunset. And then after we watch the sunset, we decided that we're going to do some stargazing. And so we put out a blanket, and it turns into a little bit of a smooch fest on the hill. And there were a lot of frogs active in the woods, and there were just the sounds of nature, branches dropping, things like that. When all of a sudden, all the noises stopped, just completely stopped, and it was silent. And we both stopped and we're like, what's going on? And then very distinctly, I could hear the sound of somebody walking up the hill. And it sounded very much like a person, not a critter, but a person walking up the hill. So we got up and we walked to the center of the hill, and we're looking around nervously. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. Like, I brought us to this spot in this park at night where there's nobody around. We're the perfect, like, it's a perfect trap. We're the perfect victims here. And so anyway, she says, oh, look, it's the Big Dipper. And I said, well, actually, that's the Little Dipper. I just took a astronomy class, and so I know stuff. And then we start talking about the cost of college textbooks and blah, blah, blah. And then we felt comfortable again, and you could hear the frogs again and whatever. So we go back and we lay on the blanket. And then while we're there for a little bit, it gets completely quiet again. And this story is a little tricky to tell. So I start hearing the footsteps come up the hill again, except in that very moment, I didn't realize that we had just done all this. I just got a little bit of feeling of deja vu at that moment. Like, this seems weird. So we go to the center of the hill, and she says, oh, look, it's the Big Dipper. And I say, it's the Little Dipper. And I'm like, I got this feeling of deja vu. I can't quite shake it. And then eventually we go lay back down on the blanket again. And then we hear the footsteps come up the hill again, go to the center of the hill again. Look, it's the Big Dipper. And right when she says that, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like going through some sort of loop. And I'm like, because that just happened. And then it wasn't just the first time it happened. How many times have we been going through this weird loop? And I really have no answers for this to explain it, but I just tell it like it happened. So then, right when I realize that we're in this kind of loop, I'm paralyzed. And I look and I can tell she's paralyzed, standing up on this hill, completely paralyzed, and the footsteps are approaching. And it's not just one, but it's these three little gray guys. Yep, three little gray guys came up on the hill, and they walked up to her, not me. They completely ignored me. And they, as they looked her up and down, they said to each other telepathically, "No, not her. Mm-mm, she's not the one. She's no good for him." And then they walked away. I'm like, "Thanks, guys." I'm thinking, way to ruin everything. And then we could move, and we grabbed our stuff and we ran. It was like a half mile, I swear, out to the car. And then I went to drop her off home, and then she says, um, "No, I'm not ready to go home yet." And so we went to Meyer. I don't know if you have Meyer there. It's a big box store, like a Walmart kind of a thing, open 24 hours at the time. And we go in and we're walking up and down the aisles, like picking up mops, reading the ingredients on cans of food and stuff like that, to sort of reground ourselves. Like, what happened was so profoundly strange. We needed something to just sort of bring us back in. And there were people obviously walking around, bright lights, that sort of thing, to help out. Then we ended up in a pet aisle, and the hamsters were awake and they were doing their thing. So we watched the hamsters for, I think, maybe about 20 minutes or whatever. And then she says, "I can go home now. I think I can go home now." And so I dropped her off at home. We didn't talk at all the next day. And in fact, when we were driving home, we didn't talk about what just happened. And so the day after, she calls me up and says, "Can I come over?" I come over, and then she broke up with me. And I realized, though, I never said what had happened had anything to do with me. I know that she knew it had everything to do with me. And we never talked about what happened up on that hill, even though I know if I needed to get in touch with her, I know people that know her, be able to, but we just never absolutely discussed it after that. And then after that, my life took a turn where they seemed to progressively sort of support me while things were still going on. Um, I don't like to talk about the next immediate part of what had happened to me, because I find it very difficult to do so without involving family members. I'm a father now. I have two children, and I think I'll leave it like that. And but the MUFON community and the whole paranormal UFO community has been tremendous to allow me to tell my story, to network with other people, find other people who've had things very similar to me. Meeting Bud Hopkins was great. He was a regular at the MUFON symposiums, if any of you have been going to them long enough. And yeah, he among so many other people have been a great source of comfort for me as I go into this next stage. And when I say it's going to be a little bit from another book to come out, to me, when I have kids in the public school system right now, to put out another book which is certainly going to be the strangest thing I have to say yet. Um, Not quite there yet, but that'll happen. So um, thanks so much for listening. Again, I have these books that go much more into detail about what I talked about tonight. I am an easy target if anybody wants to find me. I'm at MUFON.com's website, my contact info, the Michigan MUFON site. I have a personal site I haven't updated in a while, experiencer.me. I'm also on Facebook. And yeah, I want to thank you so much for listening. I turn it over back to the folks that are running the meeting. And
Thanks, Bill. That was awesome. Great talk. Does anybody here have any questions? No, nothing. We're all flabbergasted. They just can't believe it.
Any questions?
So, okay, all right. I'll hand it over to you, Anna.
So we got one question here, and then I'm not able to see the chat, so if you can monitor the chat to see if we have any questions in there.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Hello, it's me. Yeah, my question is, to Bill, during these, times when you saw aliens, did you feel like you were being spied on all the time? Like these beings are constantly looking at you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. And one of the reasons I put together a presentation like this is one of the things that isn't often talked about is that these beings have a tremendous interest in our mundane lives, so it seems, where we live, who we're with at any given part of our life, what we do professionally, and most certainly who we connect with in a romantic way, and things that happen with children, parents, all this sort of thing. For me, things happen to me because it runs on my mother's side of the family, and and it keeps on running through the family. And yeah, it seems like there's always this attention to what's going on in my life. And I gotta say, outs outside of the things that they do in my life, my personal life, it's not that tremendously interesting. I'm just, making my way through just like anybody else. And if somebody, some poor alien sap, his job is to watch me 24/7, feel sorry for them, you know, but yet they do. They have this real great interest. And I really think ultimately that everything they do is for their benefit. My assumption about the relationship that I've had with them is that in return for everything they've gotten out of me, and I when I talk about the physical stuff that happened to me, I'm not really going into any detail. A lot of it's embarrassing, a lot of it's not good. But I think that I've become a spokesperson for the phenomena in a way that suits them. I think they like some people talking about what's going on so that there's at least a little bit of conversation about the subject, but not an overwhelming amount. And so I'm useful to them. And so because I'm useful to them for their own purposes, they're not always as rough with me as they could be.
We have another question here for you in Fargo.
Hi, Bill. Thank you for sharing your story.
Mhm.
I have a question, two questions actually. First off, do you know your blood type? I'm so interested in the genetics behind all of this.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm
Um,
not one of the RH negative types, no.
yeah, but also I think that the type A maybe has something to do with it too. But my second question, or maybe it's not a question, but the girl that was in your room that was nude, did you ever have a feeling that maybe she was a child of yours that possibly happened in a hybrid program? And that's why they
No,
were excited by you naming her?
no, no, I can confirm she was not a child.
Oh, okay,
Um,
she was older.
yes, there, at some point I'll feel more comfortable sharing more details, but that was by far not my only experience with her.
Okay.
So a lot of it happens after the stuff that I share in my couple books.
Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate the personal side of this. And I was wondering if you um, use these experiences, does it dictate how you make decisions going forward in your life?
Yeah, certainly, certainly. I think that when people come into my life, that especially those who've had these type of experiences, it's not an accident. And so that I'm very cognizant and conscious of people that have the same types of experiences that I have, to be able to connect with them. And Professionally, I'm in a very good place. I work at a college where I'm open about my experiences. My people that I work with often come up to me and talk about UFO and other related stuff. And so I know that I'm in a good professional environment. And yeah, it just seems like um, the decisions I make, basically I stay in the game. It's kind of hard not to continue to be in the UFO community when your whole life has been founded on UFO stuff. You know, my very first memory, age 2, and then all through my life, I wouldn't recognize myself without these experiences. They've definitely molded who I am today. And so, I make it a point to pay it forward in the community to be able to um, help out people that may be sort of on the sidelines but still want to share their story with somebody, things like that.
Thank you. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Hopefully that was okay answer.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions online here.
Mhm.
Bill, do you believe in reincarnation?
Best answer, yes. And if I was to make a guess at what some of the follow-up questions might be, do I think that somehow I was something other than a person of Earth in a previous life, and I'm here to monitor this life and the types of connections that I have with these beings? Is it because I think that maybe I was extraterrestrial in a previous life? I don't know. I really don't have those type of answers. I did actually go through a past life regression session because I'd never had anything. Um, yeah, I just didn't know what would come out, and the experience that I remembered was something in the American West in a previous century. So it wasn't anything sort of alien related. So I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I do think that there is reincarnation. And is it possible if there's souls, are there souls sometimes in other places on Earth? Yeah, why not? I guess.
Okay. Chris, I know you got a question there. Let me get to one more here first. Tori asks, is there any idea what these guys want long term?
I'm really a person that sees the data, and sometimes the things these beings say aren't always honest or accurate, or we filter them through our own personal ideas. So the only thing that I really look at that I say, yeah, there's obviously something here, is that there is a reproductive program. They are creating people that are part us, part them, and that there is maybe a variety of reasons that they have value in this. A lot of the reproductive stuff is the stuff that I feel is on the embarrassing end of this, that is kind of tricky to share. And I also find that when somebody starts talking about the reproductive part of this phenomena, that everyone focuses on that specifically. Like, oh, tell me more about that. That sounds hot, or whatever. And it believe me, it's not. But in many cases. So um the they want to create beings like us. I don't know if it's to replace us during some sort of cataclysm here, or for other reasons, but yeah, that's about, at least my part in this process has a lot to do with that.
Okay. I got one more here online, Chris, before you hang on just a second. Dan asks, for those of us who have never experienced, do you think there is a way to invite an encounter?
It's one of those things, be careful what you wish for. Because I have been okay with what has happened to me, I think, almost exclusively because of my lifetime of experiences. When you have people who are frequent flyers like myself, you grow up with the phenomena, you accept it as part of what's going on. most of the people who are adults and have their first encounter, it doesn't go well, and it can be heavily traumatic. And people who, especially people who never really think about this phenomena, I would not. I would be careful about inviting this in, because you never really know what you're gonna get. There are people out there that do sky watches, and if they find some sort of comfort in being out with a group of people and maybe seeing a light in the sky do a 90-degree turn, then and they get something out of that, maybe that's fine. But up close and personal, it's like, the same warning label you put on a Ouija board. Be careful using, any sort of portal that's going to bring in something that you don't have any sort of vested relationship with, maybe.
Yeah, well, as Earl Grey Anderson used to say, be careful poking because the universe will poke back.
Hmm.
All right, Chris, to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Great presentation, Bill, and I've had numerous experiences myself. I was curious, when you've had some of these encounters with these beings, did you ever get like an overwhelming sense of love? Because I know a few times, well, I know several of my experiences where I was just engulfed in like this wave of love. I can't even explain it. You couldn't, you didn't see the love. You just felt it all over. And like the download that I got several times was that I kept hearing the word that love is all you need, because love is the answer to it all.
Hmm. Yeah, first of all, I want to say it was good, very briefly meeting you in Covington, Kentucky, um, over the summer at a symposium. But I've never been really love bombed by them. Certainly other people I know have had that experience. People who I know who have had very similar experiences to mine and also had that happen. I've gotten, um, one could say that some of the things that they've done in my life that I've demonstrated here, proof that they exist, maybe an interest in who I'm with romantically, just different situations like that demonstrate that they've got my back to a certain extent in certain circumstances. And this is very true for other experiences. I don't think that I've got some special relationship with them where they're like, just, we'll let whatever happens to whomever else. But Bill, yeah, all right, we're gonna help him out. I don't think I'm remotely special at all in that respect. And I think, one of the big lessons of this phenomena is how they're interested in our mundane lives for whatever weird reason. That being said, I got out of them what I needed to continue doing what I do and to be able to move on through my life. For other people who have maybe had a much harder time, maybe because of their experiences with them, maybe because of experiences in life, where they needed even more support from them to keep the train rolling. I can see that they would amp up the affection or the support, whatever, to help that person keep going. Even in cases where you hear about people have healing experiences from them, I think they will step in to a point where, if somebody needs whatever level of support, they can provide that support to keep doing what they need to do with us. And yeah, and I'm not going to, I don't know your life, but it seems like if you've really gotten that benefit from them, they realize that you needed it.
Thank you, Chris. We got 2 more questions in the chat, and then we kind of need to get this thing moving along. So Tori again asks, could they be us in the future could they be us in our future or from our future?
Yeah, it's something that I've said for a number of years, that now UFO researcher and investigator Paula Harris often says is, she has this phrase, all of the above, which is, when she's asked, does she think they're from another planet? Sure. Does she think they're us from the future? Sure. Does she think that they're interdimensional? Sure. There's enough evidence. We have a real deep, almost embarrassment of riches now of people's encounters and accounts that depending on how you want to frame them and how you want to research them, there is ample evidence for just about anything being true. And that would include the possibility, you know, and I've heard some really compelling stuff about them being us from our future. And so I see that as a possibility, but I do think they're also interplanetary and interdimensional. I think it's just everything.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it too, for sure. So, okay, last question here from MILG. Did they ever talk about, or have you ever seen them doing animal mutilations?
That's not part of my personal experience. And if I had to speculate, would these guys that I've dealt with do that? I could see them doing that. I don't mean to cast aspersions on them. Maybe they're offended, like, or do that. But yeah, I have no idea. It's not part of my experience.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you, Bill. Excellent presentation.
Oh, thank
Love
you so
having
much
man.
for listening. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys. Lemon meringue. At least it ain't right. Not bad. Why are you guys still here? Meeting's done and over with. You can go home now. You don't have to hang out here. You can go home. So Bill asked, where are we going? And their reply was, yep, we're going. Oh, that's fine.
Good times.